Apache woman's bold bargain. Wild West survival story. Grizzled Cowboy meets unstoppable force. The small town of Red Rock lay under the harsh sun, its streets empty except for the occasional tumbleweed that rolled lazily across the dirt roads. Wooden buildings, faded from years of heat and dust, lined either side of the main street. The saloon's swinging doors creaked whenever the wind passed through, and the general store's windows reflected the dry, golden light of late afternoon. It was the kind of town that seemed ordinary at first glance, but anyone who lived there knew that danger often hid behind quiet streets. That afternoon, a rider appeared on the horizon. Dust rose behind her as she moved steadily toward the town, her posture confident, her eyes scanning the surroundings with sharp attention. She wore a simple leather jacket, practical for travel, and a wide-brimmed hat that cast a shadow over her face. Her boots were worn, and her horse, strong and sure-footed, carried her with quiet power. The townspeople paused as she approached, sensing immediately that she was no ordinary traveler. Her name was Apache, an Apache woman from the lands beyond the mountains. She had grown up learning the ways of the desert and the forest, understanding how to read the wind and track animals over great distances. She knew the secrets of survival in places where others could not last a single day. Now she had come to Red Rock with a purpose that went beyond her own needs. Her people were in danger, and she had heard that a valuable resource lay hidden in the nearby canyons, something that could provide food, medicine, and protection for her tribe. She had come to trade, to negotiate, and if necessary, to fight. The townsfolk watched as she entered Red Rock's main street. Some whispered among themselves, curious about the stranger who rode alone into their town. Others eyed her warily, unsure if she brought trouble. Children peeked from behind doors, intrigued by the unusual sight. Men leaned against the saloon walls, hands resting near their revolvers, trying to gauge whether she was a friend or foe. But Apache's eyes never wavered. She moved with purpose, each step measured, as though she belonged to the land itself. At the general store, she tied her horse to the post outside and walked in. The store smelled of flour, dried beans, leather, and the faint tang of iron from old tools. Shelves were lined with canned goods, sacks of grain, and various supplies that the townspeople might need for survival in the harsh West. Apache's gaze scanned the room quickly, noting every item she might need. She was not here to steal, she had come to trade. Jed Hawkins, a grizzled cowboy in his late 50s, watched her from the doorway. Years in the West had hardened him. His face was weathered, marked with lines from sun and wind, and his eyes had seen more violence than most men could imagine. He had spent decades riding the trails, fighting off outlaws, and surviving where others had failed. Red Rock was a small stop for him, a place to rest and gather supplies before moving on. Yet, something about Apache made him pause. He had met many strangers in his time, but she carried a presence that commanded attention without force. Apache approached the counter, laying down a few small items she had brought with her: handcrafted jewelry, a pouch of dried herbs, and a carved wooden figure. She smiled politely at the storekeeper, her voice calm but firm as she began to negotiate. "I need flour, beans, and blankets," she said. "I can trade these items for what I need." Her English was clear, though accented, and every word carried purpose. The storekeeper hesitated, unsure whether to accept the trade. Some of the townsfolk muttered among themselves, curious about the stranger's boldness. But Apache remained patient, explaining the value of her goods, showing the care with which they were made. She spoke not as a beggar, but as someone who knew her worth and would not be denied. Jed watched silently, noting how she handled herself. There was no fear in her eyes, only determination and intelligence. After some negotiation, the trade was made. Apache collected her supplies and thanked the storekeeper with a nod. As she walked out, Jed stepped forward, tipping his hat slightly. "Not many folks come through here alone," he said, His voice was rough but not unkind. "And even fewer carry themselves like you do." Ahuli studied him for a moment, her expression neutral. "I have to move quickly," she replied. "My people are counting on me. This is just one step on a long journey." Jed nodded, understanding more than she realized. He had spent his life navigating the dangers of the West, and he recognized the same spirit in her that had kept him alive through countless challenges. Something about her honesty, her courage, made him want to watch her, to see what she would do next. Outside, the sun began to sink lower, casting long shadows across the dusty streets. Ahuli loaded her supplies onto her horse and adjusted her hat against the glare. She glanced down the main street, noticing a few men lingering with curiosity and suspicion. Her instincts told her to remain cautious. The West was beautiful but unforgiving, and she had already learned that those who underestimated her often regretted it. She led her horse toward the outskirts of town, seeking a place to rest and plan her next move. As she walked, Jed followed at a discreet distance. He did not speak, he did not need to. He was simply observing, weighing the choices ahead. In his years, he had learned that wisdom often came from watching and waiting, not rushing into action. Ahuli found a small clearing near the edge of the town, where a stream trickled through the rocks. She let her horse drink and carefully checked her supplies. Every item had a purpose: food, water, tools, and a few small weapons, not for aggression but for survival. She thought of her tribe, of the people who depended on her. She thought of the stories her elders had told, the lessons of patience, courage, and strategy that had been passed down through generations. She knew that success in the West was not just about strength, it was about intelligence, foresight, and resilience. As night fell, the stars appeared one by one, sparkling like distant fires in the vast sky. Ahuli sat beside her horse, quietly eating a small meal, listening to the sounds of the desert. The wind whispered through the rocks, and the distant howl of a coyote reminded her that she was never truly alone. She felt a mixture of anticipation and determination. The journey ahead would not be easy, but she was ready. Jed returned to town that evening, recounting what he had seen to a few trusted friends. He described Ahuli not as a stranger, but as a force of nature, someone who had the courage to enter a town alone, negotiate boldly, and survive in a land that could be cruel and unforgiving. His respect for her grew, even if he did not yet fully understand her mission. He knew the West had many stories, but this one was different. By the time the moon rose high in the sky, casting silver light over red rock, Ahuli had made her plans. She would stay close to the town, gathering information about the nearby canyons and the people who might threaten her journey. She would be careful, but she would not hesitate when action was needed. Her presence was no accident, and the town would soon learn that she was more than just a visitor. She was a woman on a mission, determined to protect her people and claim what was rightfully theirs. And so, as the quiet of the desert night settled over Red Rock, Ahuli prepared for the days ahead. The journey would test her strength, her patience, and her courage. But one thing was certain: in this vast, wild land she would not be ignored. She was here to survive, to bargain, and to endure, and nothing, not the harsh sun, the dust, or the suspicion of strangers, would stop her. The next morning, the town of Red Rock slowly came to life. The sun rose over the dusty horizon, painting the wooden buildings in shades of gold and orange. Horses stirred in their pens, roosters crowed, and the smell of fresh bread drifted from the small bakery near the center of town. The people went about their routines, yet there was an undercurrent of tension in the air. Word of Ahuli, the Apache woman who had arrived the day before, had spread quickly, and whispers filled the streets. Some were curious, wondering why she had come alone. Others were uneasy, suspecting trouble. The West was full of outsiders who brought danger as easily as they brought goods, but Ahuli moved with purpose, unaffected by the murmurs around her. She had spent the early hours walking quietly near the edges of town, observing the landscape and noting every path, every ridge, and every hidden corner that might be useful. She could sense the land's secrets in ways that most settlers never would. Jed Hawkins, meanwhile, was already awake. He had spent the night thinking about Ahuli, about her boldness, and about the determination in her eyes. He had seen many travelers in his years, but few carried themselves with the quiet strength she displayed. Jed decided to follow at a distance, curious about her movements but careful not to interfere. He had learned that some people needed to prove themselves in their own way, and he intended to watch and learn before stepping in. Ahuli returned to the town square, carrying a small satchel with her supplies. She approached the general store again, not for trade this time, but to speak with the storekeeper and ask questions about the area beyond Red Rock. She wanted to know about the nearby canyons, the trails that led through the hills, and the people who traveled those paths. The storekeeper, still cautious, answered carefully, providing information without revealing too much. Ahuli listened, nodding, taking mental notes. Every detail was important for her mission. As she stepped back onto the street, she noticed a group of men gathered near the saloon. Their posture was aggressive, and they spoke in low, harsh tones. Ahuli recognized them from descriptions she had heard before, a gang of outlaws who preyed on travelers in small towns. They had a reputation for cruelty and greed, and they rarely left victims unharmed. Ahuli's heart did not race, but her mind sharpened. She had faced danger before and knew how to handle it. Jed, seeing the gang from a distance, felt a familiar tension in his chest. He knew their type all too well. Outlaws like these thrived on fear, and they underestimated anyone who didn't fit their expectations. Ahuli, however, did not appear afraid. She moved carefully, keeping her distance, watching their movements and calculating her options. Jed realized she was more prepared than most people he had ever met. The gang's leader, a tall man with a jagged scar across his cheek, stepped forward, blocking Ahuli's path. Well, he said, his voice rough. What do we have here? A lone woman in our town carrying goods. Looks like trouble to me. He laughed, loud and mocking, and the other men snickered in agreement. Ahuli stopped, meeting his gaze without flinching. I'm not here to fight, she said calmly. I trade, I travel, and I have my own path to follow. I do not seek conflict. Her words were steady, but they carried a quiet authority. The gang leader's eyes narrowed and he stepped closer, as if her calmness challenged him personally. Jed moved slightly forward, careful not to draw attention. He sensed the tension escalating, and he knew that in the West, words could quickly turn into violence. But he also recognized that Ahuli's confidence and knowledge of the land were her greatest weapons. She did not need to draw a gun to command respect. The gang leader chuckled, circling her slowly. You think you can just come in here and walk around without paying us some respect? This town has rules, little lady. Everyone pays. His words were meant to intimidate, but Ahuli remained steady. I respect no one who threatens my journey or my people, she said. I mean no harm, but I will not be forced aside. Her voice was calm, yet the firmness behind it made Jed raise his eyebrows. He had rarely seen someone face a gang with such composure. The leader paused, sensing the strength in her words. He underestimated her at first, thinking her a simple traveler. But now he realized she might be different. Frustrated and unwilling to show hesitation, he motioned for his men to surround her. The townspeople, watching from doorways and windows, held their breath. Some whispered prayers under their breath, while others simply stared, unsure how this confrontation would unfold. Ahuli shifted slightly, placing herself in a stance that was both defensive and ready for movement. She did not draw a weapon, but her eyes scanned every escape route and every advantage the terrain offered. She had been trained to survive in situations where most would panic. In her mind, she mapped the street, the alleys, and the edges of town. She was not just surviving, She was preparing. Jed stepped closer, his hands resting near the revolver at his side. He did not intend to intervene immediately, but he wanted to be ready. The West had taught him that hesitation could cost lives. He watched Ahuli, silently acknowledging that she might not need help at all, yet understanding that danger was real. The gang leader's eyes flicked toward Jed for a moment, sensing the presence of another experienced man. "You," he growled, pointing at Jed. "You're no friend of hers, are you?" Jed shook his head slowly. "I'm no enemy either," he said, "but I know trouble when I see it." The leader laughed again, a harsh, grating sound. "Trouble? Oh, we are trouble, and you're looking at it. Step aside, lady, or it gets ugly." Ahuli's mind raced. She could feel the tension in the air like electricity before a storm. She considered her options carefully. She could fight, but that might bring harm to the townspeople. She could flee, but that would endanger her mission. Instead, she chose a third path, negotiation. She took a deep breath, her eyes steady on the leader. "You want respect?" she asked. "Then listen. I am not your enemy. I am here for my people. If you leave me and the town alone, I can ensure your path through these lands is safer. You will gain more from cooperation than from conflict." The gang leader blinked, taken aback by her words. Few people had ever spoken to him with such confidence and clarity. He had been challenged before, but never with such intelligence. He stepped back slightly, considering her proposal. Jed watched carefully. He could see the gears turning in the man's mind. Ahuli had not only survived the confrontation, she had shifted the balance of power simply by speaking wisely. The townspeople, still hidden behind windows and doors, began to feel a glimmer of hope. The leader finally smirked, lowering his voice. "You're clever, I'll give you that, but clever doesn't always save you." He motioned to his men. "Keep an eye on her. Make sure she doesn't slip away or bring the town against us." Ahuli nodded slightly, acknowledging the temporary truce. She knew the danger was far from over, but she had bought time. Time to prepare, to understand the gang's movements, and to protect both herself and the town. Jed gave her a subtle nod from across the street, silently showing his respect. He had learned long ago that in the West, strength came in many forms, and sometimes wisdom was stronger than any gun. As the gang left, Ahuli turned her attention back to the town. She knew she needed allies, people who could help her navigate the challenges ahead. Jed approached her, finally stepping fully into her path. "You handled yourself well," he said, "but you're not alone out here. If you need guidance, I can help. There are ways to survive that most outsiders never learn." Ahuli studied him for a moment. Trust was not given lightly in her world, but she recognized experience when she saw it. "I may need guidance," she replied, "but I also have my own path. I work for my people first and no one else." Jed nodded, understanding completely. "Fair enough. Then we watch each other's backs. Sometimes that's enough." The day wore on, and Ahuli moved carefully through the town, learning more about the people and their routines. She observed patterns in the gang's behavior, noting who seemed loyal and who might waver under pressure. She also began to map escape routes, hiding spots and vantage points in case confrontation became unavoidable. Every step was deliberate, every action calculated. By evening, she had gathered enough information to form a strategy for the coming days. The town, once wary, began to see her not as a threat, but as a capable presence. Jed, too, had grown more confident in her abilities. He realized that this woman was more than a traveler. She was a force that could change the course of events in Red Rock, for better or worse. As night fell, Ahuli sat outside the small cabin she had rented, reviewing her plan and preparing for what was to come. The desert air was cool, and the stars shone brightly overhead. She reflected on the morning's confrontation, knowing that the gang would return in some form, but also understanding that she had gained something invaluable: time, respect, and insight. Jed walked by her cabin, stopping to nod in acknowledgement. "Sleep well." "You'll need it," he said softly. Ahuli smiled faintly, appreciating the quiet support. "I will. Tomorrow is another day and we must be ready." The West was unpredictable and danger was never far, but Ahuli felt prepared. With careful planning, courage, and the knowledge that she had earned the respect of both allies and foes, she was ready to face whatever came next. The morning sun rose slowly over Red Rock, casting long shadows across the streets and buildings. The town was waking again, but there was a sense of anticipation in the air. Those who had seen Ahuli the day before whispered to each other, curious about her presence and cautious about the outlaws who had challenged her. She, however, was not distracted by rumors or fear. She had a plan, and every step she took was deliberate. Ahuli started the day by moving quietly through the outskirts of town, observing the hills, trails, and ridges. She knew that knowledge of the land was her greatest advantage. The canyons beyond Red Rock were treacherous, full of hidden paths and rocky slopes that could easily trip up anyone unfamiliar with the terrain. But for her, these obstacles were not dangers, they were tools. She could use them to outsmart her enemies, hide her movements, and protect her people. Jed Hawkins watched her from a distance. He admired her ability to move with purpose and confidence. Years of traveling the West had taught him that survival required more than weapons. It required observation, patience, and thinking ahead. Ahuli possessed all of these qualities. He decided to approach her later to offer guidance, but for now, he simply watched. There was a lesson in how she prepared for the challenges ahead. Back in town, Ahuli spoke with several townspeople she had come to trust. They were few, but they were brave, willing to help if the danger came close. She explained her plan carefully, showing them how to move quietly, where to hide, and how to signal if trouble approached. Her instructions were clear and precise, and those listening could see the wisdom in her words. She did not want to scare anyone or bring harm unnecessarily. Her goal was not to fight for the sake of violence, but to protect herself, the town, and her people. She emphasized that knowledge of the land, timing, and strategy were far more powerful than any weapon. Some townspeople were nervous, but they could see that Ahuli's calm confidence was not empty. It came from skill and experience. Jed finally stepped forward to speak with her. "You're doing well," he said quietly, standing beside her. "But sometimes, even the smartest plans need support. I've traveled these lands for years. I can help you understand the gang, their habits, and where they might strike." Ahuli studied him for a moment. She did not trust easily, but she recognized experience when she saw it. "I may need your help," she admitted, "but my focus is my people. We must plan carefully. We cannot let emotion or fear guide our actions." Jed nodded. "I understand. I'll watch your back and I'll offer advice if needed. The rest is up to you." Together, they surveyed the surrounding land, marking possible positions to monitor the gang's movements. Ahuli taught the townspeople how to hide in plain sight, using rocks, bushes, and shadows to conceal themselves. She showed them how to listen to the wind, to notice distant sounds, and to move without leaving a trace. Every lesson was practical, based on real survival skills she had learned from her tribe. By midday, Ahuli and Jed had explored several nearby trails. They found spots where they could see for long distances, places to set up lookouts, and paths that could provide quick escape if the gang approached in force. Each step reinforced Ahuli's confidence. She had done this before in the wilderness, and she could do it again here. As the afternoon sun rose higher, Ahuli returned to town to check on her supplies and speak with the storekeeper. She wanted to ensure that everything was in order before the gang had a chance to strike again. The storekeeper, who had grown to respect her, offered additional provisions: food, blankets, and rope. Ahuli accepted the help graciously, knowing that small preparations could make the difference between success and failure. Jed stayed nearby, observing how she interacted with the townspeople. They had begun to trust her, not because she demanded it, but because she had earned it through competence and honesty. He felt a deep respect for her, realizing that courage was not always loud or aggressive. Sometimes, true courage was quiet, steady, and focused on what mattered most. As evening approached, Ahuli gathered the townspeople in a small barn near the edge of town. She demonstrated practical strategies for defense, showing how to use the terrain to their advantage. She taught them how to create signals, to move silently, and to anticipate danger before it arrived. Her lessons were simple, easy to remember, and effective. The townspeople practiced diligently, understanding that survival in the West required preparation and teamwork. Jed watched silently, occasionally offering advice but letting Ahuli lead. He could see that her approach was more effective than brute force. The gang, he knew, would rely on intimidation and speed. Ahuli relied on knowledge and planning. In a confrontation, the better prepared person often had the advantage, and she had prepared well. Night fell over Red Rock, and the town grew quiet once more. Ahuli returned to the small cabin she had rented, reviewing her plans and thinking ahead. She knew that the gang would not leave quietly and that their next move could come at any moment. But she was ready. She had built alliances, gathered information, and taught the townspeople skills that could save lives. Jed joined her briefly outside the cabin. "They'll come soon," he said. "Are you ready?" Ahuli nodded. "I am, but readiness is not just about weapons. It is about thinking, knowing, and acting with care. We will be ready." The two of them sat in silence for a while, watching the stars appear one by one in the clear desert sky. The night was calm, but they both knew that danger lurked nearby. Ahuli felt a mix of anticipation and focus. She did not fear the challenge, she welcomed it. Every obstacle was a test of skill and courage, and she was determined to pass it. The next day, Ahuli returned to the outskirts of town to observe the gang from a safe distance. She noticed their habits, the way they moved, and how they communicated. Her careful observation allowed her to predict where they might strike and how they would act. She shared her findings with Jed and the townspeople, adjusting their plan to stay one step ahead. Even as the threat grew closer, the town began to feel a sense of confidence. They had learned from Ahuli that preparation, knowledge, and courage were more powerful than fear. Children who had watched from windows now whispered excitement at the idea of protecting their home. Adults, too, felt a renewed sense of control over their surroundings. Ahuli's presence had changed the way they saw themselves, giving them hope and strength. By the end of the day, she and Jed had created a clear strategy. If the gang attacked, the townspeople would use hidden positions and signals to communicate. They would defend themselves without unnecessary risk, relying on the land and careful planning. Ahuli had shown them that survival was not about panic or force alone. It was about skill, preparation, and courage under pressure. That night, as the wind rustled through the rocks and distant coyotes howled, Ahuli felt a quiet satisfaction. She had taught, observed, and prepared. The gang's threat was still real, but she had given herself and the town the tools to face it. Jed, sitting nearby, shared a silent nod of approval. He had seen many people try and fail in the West, but Ahuli had proven that knowledge and determination could turn the tide. As she settled to rest, Ahuli thought of her people. Every action she took in Red Rock was for them. She imagined the safe paths she would create, the supplies she would gather, and the skills she could bring back to her tribe. She knew the journey ahead would be difficult, but she was ready. Every challenge, every obstacle was an opportunity to prove strength, courage, and wisdom. And so, under the quiet, star-filled sky, Ahuli rested for the night. The West was unpredictable and danger was always near, but she had prepared. She had built alliances, studied her enemies, and trained the townspeople to survive. She was ready for what would come next, confident that she could face it with skill, courage, and determination. The day began quietly, with the sun rising slowly over Red Rock, casting golden light on the dusty streets, but beneath the calm, tension simmered. Apache knew the gang would not wait forever. Their arrogance and greed made them predictable. They believed the town could be intimidated, that a single woman and a few cautious townspeople would be easy prey. But Apache had prepared, and she knew that the time for careful planning was about to give way to action. She woke early, tending to her horse and checking her supplies. Every item was organized, every tool in place. She inspected the weapons she carried, not for aggression, but for protection. Her mind ran through the plan she had created with Jed and the townspeople, who would be stationed where, how signals would be used, and how they could retreat safely if necessary. She visualized each step, imagining the gang's possible moves and how to counter them. Jed arrived soon after, his horse trotting beside him as he dismounted. His face was calm, but his eyes showed the seriousness of the situation. "They're out there," he said quietly, "watching. Waiting, they'll make their move soon." Apache nodded. "Then we must be ready. The moment they strike, everyone must follow the plan. There is no room for hesitation." The townspeople gathered, their expressions a mix of fear and determination. Apache spoke to them clearly and firmly. "Do not panic. Remember your positions. Listen to the signals. Move only when you are told. If you stay calm and follow the plan, we can protect the town without unnecessary harm." Her words carried weight. The people trusted her now. They had seen her skill, her intelligence, and her courage. They knew that following her guidance could mean the difference between safety and disaster. Jed moved among them as well, offering advice where needed, but letting Apache lead. He recognized her authority and respected her judgment. As the sun climbed higher, the first signs of the gang appeared on the horizon. Dust rose in the distance as horses moved swiftly along the trails. The gang leader, the man with the jagged scar across his cheek, led the group, his expression full of arrogance. He believed he would catch the town unprepared, that Apache would be an easy target. Apache signaled quietly to Jed and the townspeople. Everyone moved to their positions, hiding behind rocks, barrels, and the edges of buildings. Their movements were silent, practiced, and precise. The gang rode into town, expecting chaos and fear, but they found neither. Instead, they encountered careful preparation, hidden observers, and an unshakable determination. The gang split into smaller groups, trying to surround the town. Apache had anticipated this and used the terrain to her advantage. Lookouts signaled her about each movement, and she directed the townspeople from hidden positions. They moved with purpose, blocking certain paths while leaving others open as traps. The gang's confidence began to waver as they realized that the town was not as vulnerable as they had thought. Jed joined Apache at a vantage point, his eyes scanning the attackers. "They didn't expect this," he said. "They thought it would be easy, but they're learning now." Apache nodded. "We have the advantage if we stay calm. Panic is their weapon. We will not give it to them." The first confrontation came near the center of town. One of the gang's men tried to charge, hoping to intimidate a group of townspeople, but Apache had predicted this. From her hidden position, she signaled, and the townspeople moved swiftly, guiding the man into a narrow alley where he became trapped. He was unarmed and surprised, unable to continue his attack. The gang leader noticed the disappearance of his man and realized that Apache's strategy was working. Frustration and anger replaced his initial confidence. He tried to rally his men, shouting orders and attempting to regain control, but the town was now a maze of hidden defenders. Every step they took brought uncertainty, and every corner seemed watched. Apache directed a few of the townspeople to create diversions. They moved quietly, knocking over barrels and scattering small debris, creating sounds that confused the gang and made them hesitate. Jed used his knowledge of the town to reinforce these movements, guiding people to safety and helping coordinate the plan. The combined efforts of Ahuli, Jed, and the townspeople created an environment where the gang could not act with confidence. The gang leader, seeing that direct intimidation was failing, decided to confront Ahuli personally. He rode to her position, confident that he could scare her into submission, but Ahuli did not move. She stood her ground, her calm eyes meeting his gaze without fear. "You think you can stop us?" he shouted. "We own this land and no one can challenge us." Ahuli's voice was steady. "You do not own what you cannot control. The town is not yours to take by fear. Leave now and no one will be harmed. Stay and you will face the consequences." The leader laughed harshly, but there was a hint of doubt in his expression. He had underestimated her, assuming that fear would be enough to force her to flee. Now he saw that she was not only fearless but also intelligent and strategic. He considered his options, realizing that attacking recklessly could cost his men dearly. Meanwhile, the rest of the gang moved cautiously, unsure of where the defenders were hiding. They could hear movements, see shadows, and sense the town's readiness. Every attempt to approach was met with careful resistance, guiding them into positions where they could be contained without unnecessary violence. Ahuli used her knowledge of the land and the town to guide Jed and the townspeople in setting traps and defensive positions. They moved quickly and efficiently, making use of every alley, rooftop, and rock. The gang's confidence continued to falter, replaced by confusion and caution. Finally, the gang leader realized that direct confrontation was not working. He called his men together, trying to negotiate a retreat. Ahuli remained calm, listening carefully to his words. She knew that she had achieved her goal. The gang had been contained, their aggression blunted, and the town was safe. "Leave now," she said firmly, "and never return. The paths you control are yours to choose, but if you threaten this town again, you will face the consequences." The leader looked at her, frustration and respect mixed in his expression. He had underestimated her and he knew it. Slowly he signaled to his men and they began to withdraw, leaving the town intact. Ahuli watched them go, her focus never wavering, ensuring that no one attempted a last-minute attack. Jed approached her once the gang had left. "You did it," he said quietly. "They didn't expect it and you outsmarted them." Ahuli nodded, though she did not smile. "This is not victory yet. We have survived this challenge, but we must remain vigilant. The West is full of dangers and we cannot assume peace will last." The townspeople emerged from their hiding places, cautiously at first, then with relief. They had witnessed a display of courage, intelligence, and strategy that they had never seen before. Children peeked from behind doors, inspired by the bravery of Ahuli and the teamwork of the defenders. Adults looked at each other, realizing that survival in the West depended not only on courage, but also on preparation and unity. Jed looked around the town, seeing the sense of confidence that had replaced fear. He had watched many confrontations in his life, but few had been handled with such skill and calm. Ahuli had not only protected the town but had also taught its people valuable lessons about courage, strategy, and working together. As night fell, the town settled back into quiet. The danger had passed, at least for now. Ahuli returned to her cabin, exhausted but focused. She tended to her horse, checked her supplies, and reflected on the day's events. Every action, every decision had been carefully planned, and the outcome had been successful. Jed joined her once more, standing silently beside her. "You changed the course of today," he said softly. "The town will remember this and they will respect you." Ahuli nodded. "Respect is earned, not given. Today we survive together. Tomorrow will bring new challenges and we must be ready." As she prepared to rest, Ahuli thought of her people once more. She had protected the town, but her mission was not complete. The paths to the canyons, the safety of her tribe, and the resources she sought still required courage, intelligence, and careful planning. But she knew that with every challenge she faced, she grew stronger and more prepared for the journey ahead. Under the quiet, star-filled sky, Ahuli rested, ready for the next day. She had faced danger, outsmarted her enemies, and protected the town. But the West was vast, unpredictable, and full of challenges yet to come, and she was ready to meet them all. The morning sun bathed Red Rock in warm light, but the town was quieter than usual. The streets were still, the wooden buildings casting long shadows across the dusty roads. The town had survived the attack of the gang, but the events of the past days had left a deep mark on the people. They were wiser now, stronger, and more aware of the power of preparation and courage. Ahuli knew that while the immediate danger had passed, her work was not yet done. She began the day by walking through the town, speaking quietly with those who had helped defend it. She praised their efforts and reminded them that vigilance was still necessary. "We have shown what can be done when people work together," she said. "But the West is unpredictable. We must remain aware and prepared. Today we recover, tomorrow we plan." Her words were calm but carried authority, and the townspeople listened closely. Jed followed her at a discreet distance, his own respect for her growing with each passing day. He had seen many travelers, many people claiming courage, but few possessed the quiet strength that Ahuli did. She had not only outsmarted a dangerous gang, but had also taught an entire town how to defend itself without unnecessary violence. Jed understood that true leadership was not about fear or power. It was about guidance, knowledge, and courage. Ahuli then returned to the outskirts of town to inspect the surrounding land. She wanted to ensure that no hidden threats remained and that escape routes and safe paths were clearly understood. Every ridge, every canyon, and every trail was familiar to her now. She moved with the confidence of someone who knew the land intimately, noting places where lookouts could be posted and areas where the gang could have attempted to hide. While she worked, Jed spoke quietly with a few of the townspeople. He emphasized the importance of remembering what they had learned and practicing the skills Ahuli had taught them. "This town is stronger now because of what she's shown us," he said. "If you remember her lessons, you can protect yourselves and each other. That is more valuable than any weapon." Ahuli returned to the town in the late morning, her horse steady under her. She checked the supplies she had collected, ensuring that food, blankets, and tools were sufficient for her journey ahead. She was not staying in Red Rock forever. Her mission to secure resources and protect her people would soon continue, but she wanted to leave the town stronger and safer than she had found it. The townspeople gathered to see her one last time before her departure. Children, curious and inspired, watched from doorways and windows, while adults approached with a mixture of gratitude and respect. Ahuli spoke to them with warmth and seriousness, emphasizing the importance of courage, preparation, and unity. "You have shown bravery," she said. "You have learned to work together, to listen, and to act with care. Remember this always. The West is full of challenges, but you are ready to face them." Jed approached as well, standing quietly beside her. "You've done more than anyone could expect," he said. "The town will remember this day and they will respect what you've taught them. I respect you as well." Ahuli nodded, her eyes meeting his. "Respect is earned through actions, not words. Today we have acted together and that is what matters." As she prepared to leave, she took a moment to observe the town. The people were no longer afraid. They walked with a sense of confidence and pride, knowing that they had survived a dangerous challenge and had learned important lessons about courage and planning. Ahuli felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that her presence had made a lasting difference. Jed mounted his horse and rode with her to the edge of town. They rode side by side, quietly discussing the paths ahead. Ahuli shared her knowledge of the trails, the canyons, and the safe routes she had scouted. Jed offered advice based on his years of experience, and together they refined the plan for her journey. Every detail was considered, every potential danger accounted for. As they reached the edge of the canyons, Ahuli paused to look back at Red Rock one last time. The town, once quiet and wary, now appeared stronger, more confident, and ready to face the challenges of the West. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Her mission here had been successful. Not only had she secured safety and resources, but she had also strengthened the community and inspired them to act with courage and intelligence. Jed spoke softly. "This is where our paths part for now," he said. "But I will remember what we've done together. You have changed this town and you have changed me as well." Ahuli nodded, her expression calm but determined. "We each have our own paths to follow, but today we have learned from each other. That knowledge will stay with us, even when we are apart." With that, Ahuli guided her horse down the trail, moving toward the canyons and the lands beyond Red Rock. Her movements were steady and purposeful, each step calculated, each decision guided by skill and experience. She was ready for the challenges that lay ahead, confident in her abilities and the preparation she had done. As she traveled, she reflected on the journey so far. She thought of her people, the lessons she had learned from her elders, and the strategies she had developed through careful observation and experience. Every obstacle had been a test, every challenge an opportunity to prove courage and intelligence. She understood that survival in the West was not just about strength or weapons. It was about thinking ahead, using knowledge wisely, and acting with confidence and determination. The canyon stretched out before her, vast and rugged, filled with rocks, cliffs, and hidden paths. Ahuli knew that these lands held both danger and opportunity. She could find the resources her people needed, but she also knew that she had to remain alert, cautious, and strategic. The lessons of Red Rock had strengthened her, but the West was full of unpredictable challenges. As night fell, Ahuli found a safe place to rest. She fed her horse, checked her supplies, and reviewed the plan in her mind. The stars shone brightly above, and the cool desert air brought a sense of calm. She reflected on the town she had left behind, the people she had taught, and the skills she had shared. She felt a quiet pride, knowing that her actions had made a difference. Jed watched her from a nearby ridge, ensuring she was safe for the night. He felt a sense of respect and admiration that he rarely experienced. He had seen many travelers in the West, but few had the combination of skill, courage, and wisdom that Ahuli possessed. He knew that her journey would continue, and that she would face more challenges, but he also knew that she was capable of overcoming them. The following days were spent carefully navigating the trails and canyons. Ahuli moved with precision, using her knowledge of the land to avoid danger and to locate the resources her people needed. She encountered small challenges along the way, from treacherous rocks to sudden weather changes, but each obstacle was met with skill and careful planning. Her experience in the wilderness had prepared her well, and she remained calm and focused, even when faced with difficulty. Eventually, she reached the areas where the valuable resources were hidden. She carefully gathered what she needed, taking only what was necessary and leaving the land as undisturbed as possible. Every action was guided by respect for the environment and for her people. She worked efficiently, knowing that time was precious and that the West could be unpredictable. As she prepared to return to her tribe, Ahuli looked back at the journey she had completed. The lessons of Red Rock, the confrontation with the gang, and the preparation and strategy she had employed all came together in her mind. She had proven that courage, intelligence, and careful planning could overcome even the most daunting challenges. She had protected a town, inspired its people, and secured the resources her tribe needed. Jed accompanied her back to the edge of the town, where they parted ways. "You have accomplished something remarkable," he said quietly. "The town will remember you, and so will I." Ahuli nodded, her expression calm but proud. "Today, we have all learned something important. Courage and wisdom are more powerful than fear. Knowledge and preparation can protect lives and communities. This is the lesson I leave behind." With that, she continued her journey, heading back to her people with the resources they needed. The West stretched out before her, vast and challenging, but she was ready. Every step she took was guided by experience, skill, and determination. She had faced danger, outsmarted her enemies, and left a lasting impact on Red Rock. As she rode toward home, Aculai reflected on the journey she had completed and the lessons she had shared. She understood that survival in the West required more than strength. It required courage, intelligence, preparation, and the ability to act decisively. She had demonstrated all of these qualities and had left a legacy that would be remembered by those she had protected and inspired. And so, under the wide, open sky of the West, Aculai rode forward, confident in her abilities and proud of the difference she had made. Her journey was not over, but she had proven that even in the harshest lands, courage, wisdom, and careful planning could prevail. The story of the Apache woman who bargained with fate, protected a town, and secured her people's survival would live on, remembered for generations as a tale of strength, determination, and unyielding spirit.